My name is Cameron. I'm 29 years old, and on September 8th, 2022, I died in an explosion at SpaceX in Texas. I'd been working at SpaceX for 6 years as a propulsion systems engineer. Started right out of college with big dreams about getting humanity to Mars. My wife Elena and I had just bought our first house in Brownsville. We were trying for our first baby. I believed we were building the future. Cameron had always believed in the power of fire harnessed for the heavens. As a boy, he watched rockets cut the sky, trembling at the sound that shook the earth, and he dreamed of being part of that thunder. By the time he was 29, that dream was his reality. He was a propulsion engineer at SpaceX, responsible for engines that would one day hurl men and women to Mars. Every morning, he rose before the sun, kissed Elena's forehead, and whispered promises that he would be careful. He had no idea how fragile those promises were. September 8th, 2022, began like any other day. Steam from his coffee curled against the dark kitchen window. The air outside smelled of salt and machine oil, a mix he had come to associate with the coast of Texas and the Starbase facility. Driving down the long, flat road, headlights bouncing on sand, he felt that heady blend of pride and fatigue that engineers know so well. They were running a pressure test, nothing more. He believed the day would end with another tick box, another step closer to Mars. Yet the air inside the engine bay was taut, like a violin string pulled too tight. Gauges blinked, men barked numbers, and he tapped on his tablet, the glow reflecting in his glasses. The hum of pumps, the hiss of lines, all familiar music to him. And then, in less than the time it takes to draw a breath, the music turned into roar. A rupture, violent, white, absolute. Heat swallowed him whole. He felt his chest crushed, lungs begging for air that would not come. Pain so sudden it was almost clean, like stepping from sunlight into water. His last thought in the body was of Elena, her laughter, her whispered prayers for children, the conversation about names they had only begun. Then silence. It is here that fear should have held him, but instead a strange peace came. The fire receded. The crushing weight lifted. He was aware, but no longer tethered. He looked down and saw himself. Twisted metal, smoke, men running, calling his name as if from across an ocean. The sight should have torn him apart, yet instead he floated, lighter than he had ever known. Around him spread a darkness that was not empty but full, humming with unseen presence. Then, a point of light broke through, not like a star but like a pulse, alive and beckoning. It grew brighter, drawing him with a gravity deeper than physics, a pull that resonated with the marrow of his being. You moved toward it, carried not by your choice, but by a recognition older than memory. The tunnel that opened was not cold like steel, nor hollow like pipes. It shimmered with warmth, alive like breath itself. Colors pulsed through it, golds and silvers laced with hues beyond human spectrum. Every heartbeat drew him closer, though he no longer had a heart. And then he felt something more than light. He felt presence. Not a figure at first, but love. A love that reached through every fracture of his soul and filled the spaces he had never admitted were empty. It pressed against him, soft and steady like the tide on sand. Fear dissolved. Regret softened. Even the memory of fire lost its sting. Cameron whispered within himself, though no voice came. Am I dead? The answer came not in words but in sensation, a tender certainty. Yes, but not lost. You are held. The tunnel widened, and peace deepened into awe. He was not alone. At the far end, within the brightness, something waited. Someone who was not stranger, but more familiar than blood. He could feel the weight of eyes upon him, not harsh, not cold, but searching, burning, knowing. Every secret he had ever hidden stood naked under that gaze, yet he felt no shame, only the relief of being known without rejection. For a moment, he thought of his wife again, her prayers at the kitchen table, her gentle corrections when he worked too late, the way her eyes lingered on him, as if she saw something in him he couldn't see himself. He felt her prayers echoing now like threads tying him to this light, tugging him forward. The closer he drifted, the more earth and metal and science seemed like shadows. Rockets, engines, charts, all of it felt small compared to this. The stars themselves were like specks of dust beside the radiance calling him. His work to reach Mars suddenly seemed like a child stacking blocks beside a mountain. The light trembled once more, brighter, more alive, until it filled everything. The explosion was behind him, the earth below him, but before him something eternal waited. His fear was gone, his pain was gone, and for the first time in all his striving, he felt what he had never felt at SpaceX, what he had never felt even in his happiest moments with Elena. Perfect peace. And with that peace came the awareness that this was not an end. It was a beginning, a crossing into revelation. Something or someone waited on the other side, and what he would see there would undo everything he thought he knew about rockets, about Mars, about the future of mankind. The tunnel of light breathed around him, every shimmer like the soft rhythm of waves touching a shore. It was not silence exactly. There was music woven into the brightness, not with instruments, not with voices, but with life itself. The tones vibrated through him. Healing places he had not known were broken. You move along as if carried by arms, lifted without strain, drawn without chains. And then the radiance gathered into form. A figure stood at the heart of the light. Not how painters had portrayed, not robes and halos, but something far deeper. His presence was weight and tenderness at once, thunder wrapped in honey. His eyes, dark, endless, alive, met Cameron's, and all the defenses he had carried as a man, an engineer, a husband, fell away. He was seen, and completely loved. It was Jesus. There was no need to ask, no need for proof. Every part of Cameron's being recognized him, as if he had been waiting for this recognition since birth. The light that poured from him was not light alone. It was love so tangible Cameron felt it soak into him, warm like the sun on skin, cool like water sliding down a parched throat, soft like the arms of a mother around a child. Tears rose, unbidden, but these were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of relief, of release. All the striving of his life, working endless hours, chasing dreams of Mars, trying to secure a future he thought would save humanity, suddenly felt like a burden he had been carrying on his own shoulders. Now, in front of this presence, the weight dissolved. Jesus did not need to speak for Cameron to know him, but he did, and his voice rolled through the air like the sound of 1,000 waters mingled with the gentlest whisper of wind and leaves. Every cell of Cameron's being bent in recognition. He called him by name, not the way a manager calls across a meeting, but the way a father whispers over his child, the way a shepherd calls to a lamb. In that single utterance, Cameron knew he was not lost in the universe. He was known. You imagine his first instinct would be to beg for answers. Instead, all Cameron could do was weep, overwhelmed by love that required no explanations. He remembered Elena again, her small prayers at the kitchen table, her faith that always seemed too simple to matter in the machinery of rockets and timelines. He realized now that her prayers had not been small at all. They had been the very cord pulling him toward this moment. Jesus smiled, and that smile contained galaxies of compassion. It was not distant or formal. It was intimate, as if the creator of all things delighted in the single life of this one man. Cameron tried to form words, but they stumbled on the edge of thought. All he managed was a whispered confession of confusion. He did not understand what was happening. And yet, in that instant, understanding did not matter. The love washing over him was enough. Love that healed regret, love that quieted fear, love that reached back through every decision, every mistake, every moment of doubt, and covered them like waves smoothing footprints on sand. There was warmth in the air around Jesus, but also power, like standing near a storm's center where everything trembles, yet nothing can touch you. Cameron felt both safe and undone. He wanted to stay there forever, to let the light swallow him whole, to rest in the presence that asked nothing but gave everything. Yet Jesus did not call him to stay. Instead, he looked into him, deeper than blood, deeper than thought, and said there were things Cameron must see. The warmth remained, but now it was threaded with urgency. Love not only comforts, it also compels. The tunnel dissolved, and the light folded into something else. Darkness pressed in, though it could not touch the glow around Jesus. Cameron realized they were standing before a scene that was not of heaven but of earth, or something like it. He would soon be shown truths hidden in shadows, secrets that men whispered behind closed doors. But for now, what mattered most was the presence before him. Jesus, radiant beyond description, was here, and Cameron was not dreaming, not hallucinating, not imagining. He was alive in death, awake in eternity, and about to learn that the story of rockets and Mars and mankind's future was not what he thought it was. The peace of the tunnel lingered, but the air was changing. What lay ahead would shake him. Yet the memory of those eyes, that smile, that love, would be the anchor for every storm to come. The glow that wrapped Cameron seemed to bend, folding into shapes he could not have conceived before. One moment he stood within a tunnel of living light. The next he was standing inside what looked like a chamber, vast, black, and oppressive. The walls weren't stone, nor metal, but a dark surface that absorbed all brightness, swallowing it like tar. At the center stretched a massive table, obsidian and polished, gleaming with a sheen that seemed alive. Around it sat figures. Some were men he recognized, faces seen on television, leaders who signed treaties, billionaires whose voices shaped industries. icons of progress and ambition. But mingled among them were others who were not quite human. Their shapes wavered, their eyes darker than voids, their presence heavy, predatory. You feel it as you picture them, an unease that presses against your ribs, urging you to turn away. Jesus stood beside Cameron, his radiance pushing back the suffocating atmosphere. Without his presence, the place would have been unbearable. The men around the table were speaking in low tones, though Cameron could hear every word as clearly as if whispered into his own ear. They spoke not of exploration, not of humanity's advancement, but of escape. The awakening is moving too quickly, one voice said, familiar in its cadence, a titan of technology. More souls are turning toward prayer, toward truth. The veil is thinning faster than our projections. Another, with eyes wholly black, leaned closer to the table. Then the timeline must be accelerated. The ships will launch sooner. Mars is the only sanctuary before the harvest begins. Cameron's stomach knotted. His whole life had been spent believing they were working for humanity's salvation, creating a future among the stars. But here, in this hidden council, he saw the plan was never about survival for all. It was an escape for the few. Jesus' hand rested on his shoulder, steadying him as dread clawed at his spirit. "This is the council," he said, his voice calm but firm. "They have gathered in secret for decades. They are guided not by wisdom, not by love, but by fear and rebellion." Cameron tried to speak, but his throat locked. His mind reeled with questions. What awakening? What harvest? Why Mars? But as he opened his mouth, the voices at the table continued, drowning his thoughts. One of the non-human figures leaned forward, its form shifting as if cloaked in shadow. "Mars will become the refuge when the king returns. From there, our dominion can be rebuilt. Humanity is pliable. They will follow their leaders, even into exile." The words hit Cameron like a stone. He thought of Elena, of her small church, of neighbors who believed their lives were too small to matter. And here, in this room, were men and beings plotting to abandon them, to use their faith in progress as a veil for something darker. Jesus did not let him drown in despair. His presence pulsed, an anchor of warmth in the icy room. "They think distance can separate them from me. They believe another planet will shield them from judgment. They do not understand that I am Lord of the universe, not only of Earth." Cameron trembled. His life's work, the dream that had driven him since boyhood, was revealed as a tool in hands he had never seen. He felt grief heavier than death itself, grief for being deceived, grief for colleagues who still believed they were building hope. The council's conversation shifted, cold and calculating. Dates were mentioned, resources allocated, agreements sealed with nods. These were not dreamers of science. They were architects of rebellion. Every line of dialogue scraped against Cameron's heart like knives, each word a mockery of all the late nights, all the pride he had once carried in his role. At last, the chamber dimmed, the scene folding back into light. Jesus turned to him, eyes deep with compassion, yet fierce with truth. "You have seen," he said softly. "Now you understand why the path you thought noble was poisoned at its root. Their plan is not salvation. It is escape. But you are not here to despair. You are here to witness." Cameron wept, not from fear this time, but from the weight of revelation. The lie had been stripped away. The council of the powerful had chosen rebellion. And he, an engineer who only wanted to touch the stars, was being shown the war beneath the surface of history. The chamber dissolved into mist, and for a moment Cameron felt he might fall, as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. Yet Jesus' presence steadied him, holding him upright in a world that shifted like smoke. Out of the haze rose a new vision, the facility at Starbase. At first it looked the same as he had always known it, the towering rockets, the cranes bending against the sky, the steel echo of machinery clanging in rhythm. But then, as though a veil was being torn away, he saw more. Dark shapes hovered above the buildings. They were not shadows from the sun, not tricks of smoke. They pulsed and moved with intent, whispering into the ears of men and women who walked the halls below. Engineers typed furiously, executives scribbled plans, leaders barked commands, and around them, unseen but real, were entities pressing thoughts into their minds, guiding hands, twisting intentions. Cameron recoiled, the sight sickening. He had known fatigue, ambition, even arrogance among his peers, but this was deception at the root. Dreams of exploration, of securing humanity's survival, were being laced with poison by forces no science could detect. And now, seeing through Jesus' eyes, Cameron understood how fragile human will could be when whispers promised greatness. Jesus spoke, his voice calm, cutting through the vision's heaviness like a blade through fog. "The enemy has always been cunning. He does not destroy by force first, but by influence. He uses noble impulses, the desire to explore, to build, to protect, and twists them until they serve his rebellion. Cameron felt shame burning in his chest. He thought of the nights he had stayed at his desk, pushing engines to their limits, boasting silently that he was helping save mankind. How many of those ideas had come not from his own mind, but from whispers cloaked in inspiration? He had thought them his own genius, yet perhaps they were daggers disguised as dreams. "You are not alone in this," Jesus said, reading the grief on his face. "Many of your colleagues have pure hearts. They seek truth, they seek discovery. But deception is thick around them. Without prayer, without discernment, they will be caught in the web." Cameron swallowed hard, watching the shadowy forms move like parasites along the walls. One entity brushed past him, its form icy and void, but when it touched the light radiating from Jesus, it shrieked soundlessly and vanished. Cameron understood. Without Christ, none of them could resist this darkness. The scene shifted again, and Cameron saw the grand designs for Mars. He saw blueprints on glowing screens, but layered behind them were darker plans, hidden tunnels, underground chambers not meant for science, but for survival. He saw robotic systems digging deep into Martian soil, constructing vast bunkers long before humanity was told such technology even existed. His stomach turned. What he had believed to be humanity's highest calling, reaching another world, was being used as scaffolding for rebellion. He remembered his first day at SpaceX, the thrill of being part of something bigger than himself. Now he realized it had been true, but not in the way he had thought. Jesus' hand rested on him again, anchoring him against despair. "Do not lose hope, Cameron. Remember, the enemy plots in shadows, but light exposes all things. What you see now is not meant to destroy your heart. It is meant to prepare your voice. You must tell what has been hidden." The words filled him with both fear and awe. Him, an engineer? A man who only wanted to provide for his wife and chase rockets? He felt so small, so unworthy to be given such a revelation. Yet as Jesus spoke, warmth flooded him again. His calling was not to stop the darkness with his own strength, but to testify to what he had seen. He closed his eyes, trying to steady himself, but the images burned there still, shadowed beings whispering to executives, underground halls on Mars, dreams twisted into traps. And when he opened them again, Jesus' gaze met his. Those eyes carried both fire and gentleness, a reminder that the war Cameron had stumbled into was not his to fight alone. The vision faded, leaving silence. Cameron's chest heaved as if he had run a marathon. He felt the sting of betrayal, the ache of broken trust, but also the strange, steady pulse of peace that came from standing beside the one who could not be deceived. He whispered in his heart, though the words trembled, "What do I do with this?" And Jesus, without moving his lips, answered with presence alone, "You will understand in time." The mist of visions dissolved, and Cameron found himself standing in a stillness so deep it was almost like dawn before the birds began to sing. The air was warm, fragrant with something sweet, like blossoms carried on wind, and he could feel his spirit calming. Jesus turned to him, and with a gentle motion of his hand, another vision unfolded. This one closer, more personal. He saw Elena. His wife sat at their kitchen table, the very one where he had left his coffee hours before the explosion. Her head was bowed, hands folded, lips moving in prayer. Morning light streamed through the curtains, touching her hair with gold. It was such a simple picture, so ordinary in its details. The worn tablecloth, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the half-empty cup of tea. And yet, Cameron saw it differently now. Her prayer was not small. It was not weak. It radiated light that stretched upward, weaving into unseen realms, building walls around him that he had never noticed. Jesus' voice was tender. "Every morning she prayed for you." Her words were like shields, guarding your heart from being hardened by deception. Without her faith, you would not stand here with me now. The truth struck Cameron harder than the explosion ever had. He thought his safety was in protocols, in hard hats and careful equations, in the precision of science. Yet here was the reality. It had been his wife's whispered prayers, unseen and unheard by any but God, that had guarded his very soul. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by gratitude and sorrow all at once. He had underestimated her faith, had sometimes brushed it aside as quaint, while he pursued engines and data. Now he saw, her faith had been mightier than all his calculations. The vision widened. He saw others, faces of strangers across the earth, women kneeling in dim churches with candles flickering, children in villages whispering prayers before bed, small congregations in houses, lifting their voices into the night, men on factory floors pausing during breaks to whisper the Lord's Prayer. They did not know him, yet their prayers intertwined with Elena's, forming a vast net of light that encircled him. Cameron wept. He realized he had never been alone, never merely one engineer in a sea of ambition. He had been carried, shielded, sustained by a chorus of intercession that stretched beyond nations, beyond languages, beyond even his own understanding. Jesus knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. The touch was steady, grounding, like cool water on fevered skin. "This is how my kingdom moves," he said. "Not always through the mighty or the famous, but through the faithful who whisper when no one is listening." Prayer is power the enemy cannot counterfeit. The words sank deep, leaving Cameron trembling. He remembered the council's plotting, the dark entities whispering into executives, the deception cloaked in ambition. He had felt helpless before such power. But now he saw it clearly. Prayer was stronger. Prayer was resistance. Prayer was war fought in silence, and it was winning. He thought of Elena again, her gentle voice, her unshakable faith. He remembered how she would sometimes wake in the night, placing her hand on his chest and murmuring a blessing while he pretended to sleep. He had smiled at her tenderness then, never realizing she was placing armor around his soul. His heart ached with both love and repentance. He wanted to thank her, to fall at her feet when he returned, to tell her she had saved him more than once without knowing it. But deeper still, he wanted to honor the God who had heard her every word. The vision softened, fading back into light, but the truth remained burning inside him. He was alive in this place, held before Jesus, because prayer had been stronger than explosion, stronger than deception, stronger than the very schemes of the council. Cameron lifted his eyes, meeting Jesus' gaze again. Gratitude overflowed in him, not only for his wife, but for the unseen army of intercessors across the world. The battle was greater than he had known, but so was the shield. And in that moment, Cameron understood, prayer was not background to life. It was the front line. It was not small, it was cosmic. And it had carried him here. The light rippled once more, and Cameron felt a shift as though time itself bent around him. He braced, sensing what was coming would not soothe like Elena's prayers, but cut deeper. Jesus raised his hand, and the air itself parted. Beyond the veil of brightness lay a vision so vast it dwarfed everything Cameron had ever known. He saw Mars. Not the red, barren desert he had studied in textbooks, not the lifeless planet shown in images sent back by probes. Instead, he saw a world as it once had been. Oceans shimmered under clouds, forests stretched like green carpets across valleys, and rivers wound silver threads through fertile plains. There were lights in cities, structures that reached toward the heavens, life bustling with ambition. It was not a myth, not a dream. It was history, alive, vibrant, undeniable. But then, as though a hand had swept across it, the scene shifted. The oceans boiled away. Skies grew thin, colors faded to rust. The forests turned to dust, and the proud structures crumbled into silence. The blue became red. The cities became ruins buried beneath sandstorms. And the planet that once teemed with life became the desolate sphere mankind now pointed to with wonder and longing. Cameron's heart twisted. He whispered without words, "What happened here?" Jesus' eyes were sorrowful, carrying both grief and truth. "They chose rebellion. They turned from me, just as many on earth are turning now. They believed they could build a kingdom without their creator, and in their pride, they fell. Judgment came, and what was green turned to red. Mars is not only a planet, it is a warning." Cameron shuddered. He saw the dust storms differently now, not merely as weather, but as echoes of rebellion. The red soil itself felt like ash from a fire long burned. And he realized with dread that humanity was tracing the same path, repeating the same mistakes, deceived by the same voices. The vision deepened, and Cameron saw men on Earth poring over Mars maps, dreaming of colonization, pointing to the stars as their salvation. But overlaying their blueprints was a shadow, the same rebellion that had stripped Mars of life. The same whisper that had once promised another world could sustain them now promised Earth's elite they could escape judgment. His chest ached. He thought of his colleagues, so sincere, pouring their hearts into building engines, believing they were part of humanity's greatest chapter. How many of them would ever know that Mars was not their destiny, but their mirror? Jesus placed his hand on Cameron's shoulder again, his touch carrying both comfort and weight. This has happened before. Worlds rise and worlds fall. But the choice is always the same. Will they serve me, or will they serve themselves? Earth now stands where Mars once stood. Cameron felt the words sear into him. They were not abstract. They were urgent. He could see the trajectory, greed fueling technology, pride pushing exploration, deception masking rebellion. Earth's story was being written with the same ink, and unless humanity turned, its ending would be no different. The image of Mars lingered, a ghost of what once was, a prophecy of what could come. Cameron trembled at the weight of it, overwhelmed by sorrow for a world he had never known but now grieved as if it were his own. The rust-red dust, once lifeblood soil, now lay as testimony that rebellion ends only in ruin. Yet in the midst of sorrow, Jesus' presence shone steady. His voice carried both sadness and unshakable authority. The enemy wants Mars to be his refuge, a fortress against my return. But he does not understand. My dominion is not bound by planets. My kingdom stretches across stars. There is nowhere he can hide. Cameron lifted his gaze again, tears streaking his face. The revelation burned in him. Mars was not humanity's salvation. It was its warning. And the choice before Earth was clear. Repentance or ruin. Service or rebellion. Redemption or dust. The vision of Mars dissolved, leaving Cameron trembling in silence. But the silence was brief, like the breath before a storm. Jesus' eyes grew solemn, and with a sweep of his hand, time itself unfolded before them. Not history this time, but future. A timeline stretched out, glowing like threads in a loom. Each thread shimmered with choices, decisions, consequences. And at its center pulsed urgency. Cameron leaned forward, his spirit pulled to what Jesus was showing. At first, he saw headlines, news stories he could almost recognize, celebrations of test flights, rocket boosters landing, announcements of missions to Mars. But beneath the public spectacle, he saw another layer. Plans hidden in secret boardrooms, strategies signed with handshakes cloaked in darkness. Jesus' voice carried sorrow, but also clarity. They tell the world these missions are decades away. They promise exploration, science, discovery. But I tell you, their true plan is not far off. Within only a few years, they intend to flee. The first wave will not be explorers. It will be the elite, the powerful, the deceived, the ones who believe they can escape judgment by leaving Earth. Cameron's stomach sank. He had believed Mars was a dream reserved for generations ahead, something his grandchildren might witness. But now he saw it was imminent, accelerated by fear and deception. Images flashed. Construction already underway, robotic diggers carving underground sanctuaries on Mars, ships prepared not for colonists, but for the wealthy and powerful who had aligned themselves with dark forces. His mind raced. All the long nights at SpaceX, every briefing about safety, every pep talk about making humanity multiplanetary, it had been a mask. Behind the mask, a countdown ticked. Jesus placed his hand on Cameron's arm, steadying the tremor in his spirit. They believe distance will shield them from my return. They think that by stepping onto another world, they can hide from the harvest. But they cannot outrun the one who made the stars. Cameron watched as the vision shifted. He saw people on Earth, families gathering for meals, children playing in streets, workers laboring without knowing. They lived unaware that powerful men plotted to abandon them, to leave them behind when judgment came. His heart broke, not only for the betrayal but for the blindness. Tears welled as he thought of Elena. She would still be at that kitchen table, praying for him, believing that life could be ordinary, safe. How could he ever tell her that the world's future was being decided in secret? How could one man carry such a burden? Jesus' gaze pierced through his fear. Do not think you must stop the plan with your own strength. That is not your calling. Your task is to warn, to reveal, to awaken. I am sending you back so that others may see. Their safety is not in rockets or bunkers. Their safety is in me. The vision expanded again, and Cameron saw the enemy's urgency. He saw meetings thick with tension, leaders whispering about time running out, entities pushing them with unseen pressure. The deception was accelerating because truth was breaking through. Prayer groups across the world were rising. People were turning back to God in numbers greater than the enemy anticipated. Cameron felt a spark of hope ignite within the dread. If deception was accelerating, so too was awakening. The battle was fierce, but it was not one-sided. The enemy was desperate because his time was short. Jesus' smile returned, faint but steady. Remember, they can build their bunkers, launch their ships, flee to the farthest reaches of space. But I am already there. There is no refuge from my kingdom, except in my mercy. Cameron bowed his head, his heart pounding. The timeline burned before him, a countdown not to Mars, but to revelation. And he knew now. What he had been shown was not science fiction, not speculation. It was truth, and truth demanded witness. The vision of timelines faded, leaving Cameron standing once more in the soft radiance of Jesus' presence. For a moment, the silence felt unbearable, as though his heart could not hold the weight of what he had seen. He wanted to cling to the peace of the tunnel, the safety of Elena's prayers, the steady warmth of that hand upon his shoulder. But Jesus' eyes now carried both compassion and decision, and Cameron knew something greater was coming. Before him, the light shifted into a vast threshold. Beyond it shimmered a beauty so indescribable it made his chest ache. Landscapes that pulsed with living colors, rivers like crystal, songs woven into the very air. It was paradise. For the first time since the explosion, Cameron felt the temptation of rest. No more burden, no more deception, no more struggle with doubt or pain. Just peace, eternal and whole. Jesus looked at him, and with that gaze Cameron knew the choice was his. He could step forward, cross into that perfect place, and never again taste sorrow. Or he could turn back, return to the brokenness of earth, to the confusion of a world blind to the council's schemes, to the ridicule of men who would call him delusional. His heart warred within him. Every fiber of his body longed to stay in that paradise, to rest forever in the light that healed every wound. Yet even as he longed, images flooded his spirit. Elena at the kitchen table, hands folded, whispering his name. Colleagues laboring in the shadow of deception. Children growing up under skies clouded with lies. He thought of them, unknowing, unaware, and his soul trembled. Jesus stepped closer, his presence wrapping Cameron like a mantle. You may stay, his eyes seemed to say, or you may return. But if you return, you will not return the same. You will carry the weight of what you have seen. You will bear it not as a burden only, but as a witness. Cameron fell to his knees, torn. I want to stay, his heart confessed. I want to remain where pain cannot reach. But deeper still, another cry rose. They need me. She needs me. I cannot leave them without warning. And in that moment, he knew the answer. His longing for paradise was real, but love was stronger. Love for Elena. Love for those deceived. Love for humanity itself. He lifted his head, tears streaking his face, and whispered, not with lips but with soul, I will go back. Jesus knelt with him, placing both hands over his. The touch surged with power, like fire, like electricity, like water rushing through stone. Yet it was love that defined it most. Love so great it steadied his trembling heart. You will go back, Jesus' presence declared. But not alone. Every time you falter, I will remind you of this moment. Every time you are mocked, I will whisper my truth again. Every time you despair, I will carry you. The burden will be heavy, but the yoke will be mine. The vision of paradise shimmered, fading into mist. The ache of leaving it behind tore at Cameron, yet in the same instant, he felt a strange joy, because he was leaving not in defeat, but in mission. He was being entrusted with a truth greater than any rocket, greater than any dream of Mars. As the threshold dimmed, he felt the pull of earth again, weight returning to his chest, sound creeping into his ears, the faint pulse of life tugging him downward. Yet Jesus' presence lingered, his eyes etched into Cameron's soul, his words burning like fire within him. You are not called to escape. You are called to warn. And with that, Cameron surrendered. He chose earth over paradise, mission over rest, burden over release. Because love demanded it. The light dimmed into darkness, and with it came the heavy return of flesh. Cameron gasped. His lungs burned as though the air itself was fire, and sharp pain pierced through his ribs. Beeping machines filled his ears, urgent voices swirled around him, and the sterile sting of hospital antiseptic invaded his nose. His chest rose and fell with effort, every breath a reminder of the brokenness he had left behind. He opened his eyes. Elena sat beside him, clutching his hand with desperate strength. Her face was streaked with tears, hair undone, her whole body trembling. When his eyes met hers, she released a sob that sounded like both grief and resurrection. They said you were gone, she whispered, clinging to him as if he might vanish again. Doctors crowded around, speaking words like impossible, miracle, 17 minutes, no brain damage. He hardly heard them. His gaze locked on Elena, and he knew she had been right. Her prayers had carried him. He squeezed her hand weakly, whispering, I'm here. But he was not the same man who had kissed her goodbye that morning. Something had shifted forever. He had seen behind the veil. He had stood in the presence of Jesus. He had witnessed the counsel, the whispers, the hidden war. And now, every heartbeat throbbed with the weight of mission. The days in the hospital blurred. Doctors tested, nurses marveled, visitors whispered. But the nights were the hardest. He would close his eyes, and the visions replayed. The council table, the shadows over Starbase, Mars as it had been and as it would be. He woke trembling, yet always with one anchor. Jesus' promise. You will not be alone. On the third night, as Elena sat with him, he told her everything. He described the tunnel of light, the voice of Jesus, the council of elites, the truth about Mars, and the mission he had been given. She listened without interrupting, her eyes wide but steady. When he finished, silence lingered like a held breath. Then she said the words that pierced him deeper than any explosion. "I believe you. I've been praying for 2 years that God would show you the truth." Tears filled his eyes again. She had known. She had sensed the darkness around his work long before he had. Her prayers had not only saved him in death, they had prepared him for this mission. When he was discharged, he never returned to SpaceX. Officially, he cited recovery. Unofficially, he could not serve in building escape pods for rebellion. His resignation carried whispers among his colleagues. Some thought him traumatized, others thought him mad. But a few came quietly, admitting they too had felt unease. One confessed he had dreamed of dark figures in the facility for months, but had buried it as stress. Cameron began to speak at a small church Elena attended, sharing his testimony. He was no preacher, no polished speaker, but his words carried fire born of truth. The congregation wept, prayed, and many whispered afterward that his story confirmed things they had long felt but never voiced. Still, the burden weighed heavy. Every news headline about Mars, every triumph of rockets, every photograph of red deserts reopened the wound. He grieved not the progress of science itself, but the deception twisting it. He prayed daily for those still blinded, asking God to protect pure-hearted engineers from manipulation. His relationship with God deepened in ways he had never known before. Prayer was no longer ritual. It was breath. It was warfare. It was dialogue with the one whose eyes had burned into his soul. He walked through days aware of unseen battles raging, but also of unseen angels surrounding. Every time doubt rose, every time fear whispered, he remembered the voice in the tunnel. "You are not called to escape. You are called to warn." And so he did. With trembling voice, with tearful prayers, with quiet conversations that seemed small but carried eternity's weight, Cameron began to fulfill the mission Jesus had given him. The weeks turned into months, and Cameron lived each day as a man suspended between two worlds, one of boardrooms, rockets, and headlines, and the other of visions, prayer, and eternal warnings. Every newspaper article about Mars missions struck him differently now. Where others saw glory, he saw deception. Where others saw humanity's future, he saw rebellion cloaked in ambition. He began to write, filling journals late into the night with every detail of what Jesus had shown him. He wrote about the council, about the entities whispering in the shadows of SpaceX, about the past life of Mars, about the timeline of deception accelerating with urgency. But most of all, he wrote about Jesus' love, the love that had steadied him, the love that had offered him paradise yet sent him back for mission. In his church, his testimony grew into a beacon. Some came skeptical, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Yet when Cameron spoke, something beyond his voice carried the weight of truth. He described the tunnel of light, the council plotting escape, the hand of Jesus on his shoulder, the prayers of Elena shielding him daily. People wept, people prayed, and some confessed they had felt the same stirrings in their spirit but had never dared put them into words. The more he shared, the more resistance came. Old colleagues sent messages, accusing him of losing his mind, begging him not to throw away his career. Others whispered rumors that he was exploiting trauma for attention. But Jesus had warned him of this, and each insult only drove him deeper into prayer. He reminded himself, Noah had been mocked. The prophets had been ridiculed. He was not called to be believed by all, only to witness. One evening, Cameron stood outside under the Texas night sky. Stars stretched endless above him, the same stars that once ignited his dream of exploration. He thought of Mars, of the dust storms that were not just weather but judgment. He thought of Earth, still beautiful, still alive, yet teetering on the same choice. He whispered into the wind, "Lord, let them hear." And in that whisper, he felt it again, the steady presence, the gentle authority. Jesus' words echoed in his spirit. They can run to Mars, they can run to the farthest galaxy, but they cannot run from me. Cameron closed his eyes, tears warming his face. The truth was clear now. Humanity's hope was not in becoming a multi-planetary species. Humanity's hope was in becoming a redeemed species. The countdown was not to rockets lifting from Earth, but to the King returning in glory. And when that day came, no council, no bunker, no galaxy would shield rebellion from his reign. He lifted his hands to the sky, feeling both the weight of the mission and the joy of being chosen to bear it. He was one man, yes, one engineer with broken ribs and trembling faith. But he was also a witness, called, awakened, sent back. And with every breath he had left, he would speak the truth. Safety is not in fleeing to other planets. Safety is in running into the arms of the one who created them all. The world was rushing toward deception, but Cameron carried a vision of hope stronger than fear. He carried the memory of eyes deeper than galaxies, of a voice that rolled like waters and whispered like wind, of a love that shattered every lie. And with that memory, he knew his mission was not in vain. The countdown had begun, not to Mars, but to the return of the King. Slowly now, let the story settle into your heart. You have walked with Cameron through fire, through light, through revelation, and through the return to a broken but waiting world. You have seen what was hidden, the plans of men, the whispers of shadows, the fragile line between rebellion and redemption. But more than that, you have seen the one who holds it all. Jesus did not reveal Mars as a warning so we would fear planets. He revealed it so we would remember the lesson. Rebellion ends in ruin, but repentance opens the way to life. The elites may scheme, the councils may plot, the powerful may build ships to flee. Yet there is no escape from the love and the authority of Christ. His kingdom is not bound to earth. It is written into the stars. And now, the choice is laid before you. It is not about rockets or galaxies. It is not about who holds the patents or the plans. It is about your heart. Will you turn toward the one who calls you by name, who offers not just escape, but redemption? Or will you follow the path of Mars, grasping for independence, only to find dust and silence at the end? Do not wait for another day. Do not believe you can postpone eternity. The countdown has already begun, not to Mars, not to a new world, but to the return of the King. If these words resonate with you, please leave an amen in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and share it with at least 3 friends or family members right now. Now is your time to make a difference. Spreading this message is not only an act of love, but also a mission that Jesus himself has entrusted to you.